The governess arrived at the estate on a night when the moon hung low and red, and every instinct told her to turn back. Willa Dalton clutched her worn leather satchel tighter as the iron gates groaned open, revealing a driveway that seemed to stretch into absolute darkness. The taxi driver had refused to go any further than the outer wall, mumbling something about the place being cursed before speeding away, leaving her standing alone in the November chill. She'd taken the position out of desperation. 3 months behind on rent, her teaching certificate gathering dust, and her landlord's threats growing more serious by the day. When the offer came through an encrypted email, generous salary, room and board included, reading services required for an unnamed client, she'd barely hesitated before accepting. Now, staring at the mansion that rose from the shadows like something carved from midnight itself, she wondered if poverty might have been the safer choice. The building was a masterpiece of Gothic architecture transplanted impossibly into the heart of modern Chicago. Spires reached toward the sky, gargoyles perched on every corner, and every window remained dark despite the late hour. It shouldn't exist here. Surrounded by skyscrapers and city lights, yet it dominated the landscape as though it had been here first and everything else had simply grown up around it in fearful reverence. Willa forced her feet forward. The gravel crunched beneath her second-hand boots, each step feeling like a commitment she couldn't take back. She'd barely reached the front steps when the massive oak doors swung inward, revealing a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a Victorian painting. Severe black dress, hair pulled back so tightly it seemed painful, skin pale as parchment, and eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. Miss Dalton. It wasn't a question. You're late. The driver wouldn't. Willa started, but the woman had already turned, clearly expecting her to follow. The interior was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow, candelabras provided the only light despite the presence of electrical wiring along the walls, and portraits lined every surface, depicting pale, beautiful people with predatory eyes. The temperature inside felt colder than the November night outside. I am Constance, head of household, the woman said without looking back. You will address His Majesty as Your Majesty or Sire. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not ask questions about his condition. You will not look directly at him unless he commands it. You will read from the books provided for exactly 2 hours each night. Beginning at midnight, you will not deviate from the text. You will not stop reading even if he appears to be sleeping or in distress. Do you understand? Willa's throat felt dry. His Majesty? Constance stopped so abruptly that Willa nearly collided with her. When the woman turned, her eyes held something almost like pity. This is your last chance to leave, girl. Take the position or don't, but once you enter his chambers, you are bound by contract and by something far older than contract. Choose. Every rational part of Willa's brain screamed at her to run. Instead, she thought of the eviction notice stuffed in her satchel, her mother's medical bills, the rejection letters from every school in the city. I'll stay. Something flickered across Constance's face, respect maybe, or resignation. Then God help you. They climbed stairs that seemed endless, passing floor after floor of closed doors and silent corridors. Finally, they reached the top of the mansion, where a single door stood at the end of a hallway lined with mirrors. Willa caught her reflection as they passed, small, tired, her blonde hair escaping its practical bun, her second-hand coat threadbare at the elbows. She looked like exactly what she was, desperate. Constance stopped before the door, producing an old iron key. He was not always as he is now. Remember that when it becomes difficult. He was not always cold. Before Willa could ask what that meant, the door opened and Constance guided her inside. The chamber was enormous, decorated in deep burgundies and blacks, with a fireplace large enough to stand in that held no fire. Shelves lined every wall, packed with books in dozens of languages. And in the center of it all, in a chair that resembled a throne more than furniture, sat the most hauntingly beautiful man Willa had ever seen. He was tall, she could tell, even seated, with skin so pale it seemed to glow in the candlelight. His hair fell past his shoulders in waves of pure white, contrasting sharply with his black silk shirt and tailored pants. His features were sharp and aristocratic, his mouth set in a hard line, and his eyes, God, his eyes were the deep red of garnets, ancient and cold and utterly inhuman. Your Majesty, Constance murmured, bowing deeply. The new reader. He didn't acknowledge her. He didn't move at all. He simply stared at nothing, his expression carved from ice, looking for all the world like a beautiful statue instead of a living being. Constance gestured to a chair positioned several feet away from him and to the stack of books on the small table beside it. Begin with the top volume. Do not stop until 2 hours have passed. I will return to collect you. She leaned close, her breath cold against Willa's ear. And Miss Dalton, do not under any circumstances try to touch him. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Willa's heart race. For a long moment, Willa stood frozen, alone in the room with this impossible man who hadn't so much as blinked since she'd entered. She approached the chair slowly, her instincts screaming danger with every step. Settling into the seat, she reached for the top book with trembling hands. It was an ancient copy of medieval poetry, the pages yellowed with age, written in Middle English that would require all her concentration to translate properly. She glanced at the man, His Majesty, apparently, but he remained motionless, staring at nothing. Willa cleared her throat softly and began to read. Her voice shook at first, stumbling over the archaic language, but as minutes passed and nothing terrible happened, she found her rhythm. She'd always loved reading aloud, had dreamed of being a teacher before the budget cuts and the economy and reality had crushed that dream. The poetry was beautiful despite its age, tales of knights and love and honor. The man never moved, never blinked, never gave any indication he heard her at all. After exactly 2 hours, Constance returned. Willa's voice was hoarse, her throat dry, but she'd read every word without stopping. The man remained exactly as he'd been, frozen and cold and absent. "Come," Constance said simply, and Willa followed her out, glancing back once to see him sitting alone in that vast chamber, beautiful and terrible and utterly isolated. Constance led her to a small but comfortable room 3 floors down. "Your quarters. You may use the library during the day, the kitchen between 8 and 9 in the evening. You will stay away from the East Wing. You will be ready at 1:45 to midnight each night. Your salary will be deposited weekly." "What's wrong with him?" Willa couldn't help asking. "Why does he need someone to read to him?" Constance's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because 500 years ago, when he still felt things, he loved poetry. And because somewhere deep in that frozen heart we hope he still does. We hope something might reach him before he's lost completely." "Lost to what?" "To the cold, Miss Dalton. To the terrible, endless cold that comes for all our kind eventually, if we live long enough. The cold that makes us into the monsters humans fear." She paused at the door. "His Majesty is Quintus Ashford, King of the North American Vampire Courts, Lord of Chicago, and the oldest living vampire on this continent. He has ruled for 3 centuries with wisdom and strength. But 10 years ago, something broke inside him. He began to freeze from the inside out. No blood satisfies him, no warmth reaches him, no pleasure or pain or anything at all touches him anymore. He simply exists, growing colder each year. You are the 43rd reader we've hired. What happened to the others?" "They quit." Constance's eyes held a warning. They couldn't bear it, watching him fade away night after night without any sign of reaching him. "Most left within a week." She turned to go, then stopped. "But you're different, I think. You're desperate enough to stay, and desperate enough to keep trying. Let's hope that's enough." Over the following nights, Willa established a routine. She'd wake late morning, explore the massive library that took up 2 entire floors of the mansion, eat her solitary dinner, and then prepare herself mentally for the midnight reading session. Each night she sat in that chair across from Quintus Ashford, reading poetry and literature and history to a man who gave no indication he heard a single word, but Willa was nothing if not observant. And after the first week, she began to notice small things. The way his fingers would occasionally twitch when she read certain passages. The almost imperceptible shift in his breathing during emotional moments in the text. The way his eyes, though they never focused on anything, seemed fractionally less cold when she read poetry about love or hope or warmth. He was in there. Somewhere deep inside that frozen exterior, the Vampire King was still present, just buried under whatever terrible cold had consumed him. On the 10th night, Willa made a decision. Instead of reaching for the designated book, she pulled out a worn paperback from her own collection, a modern romance novel she'd read a dozen times. Full of humor and passion and life, she began to read, her voice steady, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Quintus Ashford moved. His head turned, just fractionally, in her direction. His eyes still didn't focus on her, but they'd shifted from staring at nothing to staring at the space where she sat. It was the smallest victory, but Willa's heart soared. "You don't want medieval poetry, do you?" she whispered, setting the book aside. "You've probably heard every classical work 1,000 times over 500 years. You want something new. Something different." He didn't respond, but he also didn't look away. Willa picked up her book again and continued reading, pouring emotion into every word, letting her voice rise and fall with the drama of the story. She read past the 2-hour mark, so engrossed she didn't notice Constance had arrived until the woman cleared her throat. "Miss Dalton, 5 more minutes," Willa interrupted, not looking up. "Please, I'm at a crucial part." To her shock, Constance didn't argue. When Willa finally finished the chapter and looked up, Quintus's eyes had closed. his expression fractionally less harsh than usual. It was the first time she'd seen him as anything other than frozen and staring. Extraordinary, Constance breathed. In 10 years I have never seen him close his eyes. From that night forward, Willa abandoned the approved reading list entirely. She brought in contemporary fiction, true crime stories, science articles, even gossip magazines. Anything and everything from the modern world she suspected Quintus had stopped paying attention to when the cold had taken him. And slowly, incrementally, he began to respond. His eyes started tracking toward her voice. His fingers would drum softly against the chair's arm during suspenseful moments. Once, when she read a particularly funny passage, she could have sworn she saw the corner of his mouth twitch, but he never spoke, never acknowledged her directly, never gave any indication he was truly aware, just that some automatic part of him was responding to stimuli, until the night everything changed. Willa had been there for 6 weeks. It was deep December now, and Chicago was buried in snow. She'd grown comfortable in the strange routine of the mansion, spending her days researching vampire history in the extensive library, trying to understand what had happened to Quintus and how she might help. She'd learned he'd been a fierce warrior in his human life, a minor noble in medieval Scandinavia, who'd been turned during a battle and had risen through vampire society through a combination of strategic brilliance and sheer determination. He'd been known for his fairness, his strength, and his unexpected capacity for mercy rare among vampire lords. Then, 10 years ago, he'd executed a vampire who'd slaughtered an entire human family. It was justified under their laws, necessary even. But the vampire had been his oldest friend, turned by the same maker, and the betrayal had broken something fundamental inside Quintus. He'd withdrawn from court, from his duties, from everything, as the cold had crept in and frozen him from the inside out. The Vampire Council had tried everything, different blood sources, magical interventions, even bringing in human psychiatrists who specialized in trauma. Nothing had worked. He'd simply continued to freeze, day by day, year by year, until he'd become the statue Willa read to each night. On this particular evening, Willa had chosen to read from a collection of modern poetry about loss and healing. The words were raw and honest, speaking to grief and the slow, painful process of letting yourself feel again after devastating heartbreak. She was midway through a particularly emotional piece when she heard it, a sound so soft she almost missed it. A sharp intake of breath. Willa's eyes snapped up from the page. Quintus's face had changed. His expression, which had been softening incrementally over the weeks, now showed clear distress. His jaw was clenched, his pale hands gripping the arms of his chair hard enough that she could see his knuckles whiten further. His eyes, still that deep garnet red, had focused directly on her for the first time, and they held such bottomless pain that Willa's breath caught. "Your Majesty," she whispered. "Stop." His voice was like gravel, rough from disuse, barely audible. "Please, stop." Willa closed the book immediately. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to know." His eyes closed, his whole body trembling with some massive effort. "Don't apologize. I haven't felt anything in so long." He trailed off, seeming to struggle for words. When he opened his eyes again, they focused on her with such intensity that Willa felt pinned in place. "Who are you?" "Willa Dalton. I'm your reader. I've been coming here for 6 weeks. 6 weeks." He repeated it as though testing the concept. I thought it had been 1 night. Or 100 years. I can't tell anymore." His hand lifted slightly, trembling, before falling back to the chair. "What did you read just now? What was that?" "Modern poetry. About grief and healing." "I thought." Willa hesitated. "I thought maybe if you heard something that acknowledged the pain instead of trying to distract from it, it might reach you differently." Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. "You're very perceptive for a human. I had a lot of time to research in your library. I know what happened with your friend. I'm sorry." Quintus's expression hardened immediately, the brief animation draining away. "You know nothing about it." "You're right," Willa agreed quietly. "I don't know what it's like to live for centuries, or to have to execute someone you love for their crimes, or to feel yourself freezing from the inside out. But I do know what it's like to be so hurt you'd rather feel nothing at all. I know what it's like to go numb because the alternative is drowning." His eyes locked onto hers, searching. What could a young human possibly have experienced to understand that? "My father murdered my mother when I was 16, Willa said, her voice steady despite the old pain rising in her throat. "Did it right in front of me, and for 2 years after I felt nothing. I went through the motions, went to school, worked, existed, but I was frozen inside. Empty. Everyone said I was handling it so well, was so strong. But I wasn't strong, I was just gone. It took years of therapy and work to let myself thaw enough to feel again, and I'm still working on it." The silence that followed was heavy. Quintus stared at her with an expression she couldn't read, his ancient eyes seeing something in her he hadn't expected. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice gentler. "That's a terrible burden for anyone to carry, especially one so young." "We all carry our burdens," Willa replied. "Some are just colder than others." The faintest ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first she'd ever seen before it vanished. "Read more, please. I want to try to feel it." So Willa read on through poetry about pain and healing, loss and hope, freezing and thawing. And Quintus listened, his eyes never leaving her face, his expression shifting and changing as emotions flickered across his features like sunlight through clouds. When Constance came to collect Willa, he looked almost disappointed. "Tomorrow night?" he asked, his voice still rough. "Every night," Willa promised. After that evening, everything shifted. Quintus was still cold, still struggled to feel or express emotion, but he was present now. He would ask Willa questions between readings about the modern world, about her life, about the books she chose. His questions were intelligent and insightful, revealing a keen mind that had been trapped in ice but never truly dormant. Willa began arriving earlier, staying later. She'd talk with him about everything from politics to art to the small mundane details of human life he'd forgotten while frozen. He listened with an intensity that was almost overwhelming, as though he were starving for connection after years of isolation. "Tell me about coffee," he said one night, completely serious. Willa blinked. "Coffee? I remember the taste from centuries ago, but it's changed, hasn't it? Everything always changes. Tell me how humans drink it now." So Willa described modern coffee culture in exhaustive detail, the specialty shops, the elaborate drinks, the social rituals around it. Quintus listened as though she were describing the secrets of the universe, occasionally asking clarifying questions. By the end, he looked almost amused. "You're telling me humans now pay $7 for coffee with foam art? $8 in the trendy places. Extraordinary." He shook his head slowly. "When I was human, coffee was a rare luxury only the wealthy could afford. Now it's so common people complain about its cost while buying it daily. The world has become very strange." "Do you miss it?" Willa asked. "Being human?" Quintus considered the question seriously, his red eyes distant. "I don't remember enough of it to miss it specifically. I was 28 when I was turned, dying on a battlefield, angry and afraid. I remember pain and cold and then rebirth into something stronger. But humanity itself?" He paused. "I miss the certainty of it. As a human, I knew what I was. As a vampire, I've spent 500 years questioning what I've become. You've been a good king from what I've read. Fair, just, protective of both vampires and humans in your territory, until I wasn't." The coldness crept back into his voice. "Until I failed so completely that I broke." "You didn't fail," Willa said firmly. "You made an impossible choice because it was the right thing to do, and it hurt you. That's not failure. That's the cost of having a conscience." Quintus looked at her for a long moment. "You're very wise for someone so young." "How old are you, Willa Dalton?" 24, a child," he murmured, but not unkindly, "and yet you speak like someone who's lived much longer. Your trauma aged you, as yours froze you." Willa met his eyes steadily. "But we're both still here, still trying. That has to count for something." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the ice, a glimpse of warmth beneath. "Yes," he said softly. "I suppose it does." As January arrived and Willa began her third month at the mansion, she realized with some surprise that she'd grown to genuinely enjoy her evenings with Quintus. What had started as a desperate job had become the best part of her day. He was fascinating, intelligent, thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that emerged more frequently as he continued to thaw. He'd started requesting specific books, showing preferences and opinions. He'd begun asking about her day, seeming genuinely interested in her research and her life. And he was beautiful. God, he was beautiful. Willa tried not to think about it, tried to maintain professional distance, but it was impossible to ignore. The way candlelight played across his pale features, the elegant way he moved when he occasionally stood to pace during their discussions, the rare smiles that transformed his austere face into something breathtaking, all of it affected her more than she wanted to admit. She was falling for him. It was foolish and impossible and absolutely inevitable. On a particularly cold night in mid-January, Willa arrived for their session to find Quintus standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered city. He'd clearly been standing there for a while, perfectly still in that way vampires could manage, looking like a statue carved from marble and moonlight. "Your Majesty," she said softly. "Quintus," he corrected without turning. "When we're alone, please call me Quintus. I grow weary of formality." "Quintus, then." She liked the way his name felt in her mouth. "Is everything all right?" "I went outside today." He said it quietly, still staring at the window. "First time in a decade. I walked in the garden, felt the sun, or I would have if I could still tolerate it. I stood in the shade and watched the city and felt, he paused, something, not much, but something. It hurt, but it was better than the numbness. Willa's heart clenched. That's progress. It's torture, he countered, finally turning to face her. In the candlelight, his red eyes seemed to glow. For 10 years I felt nothing. Now, thanks to you, I'm starting to feel again, and every emotion is agony. I can feel the cold inside me fighting against it, trying to freeze everything solid again. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting it. You are, Willa said with absolute certainty. How can you possibly know that? Because you're here. Because you're trying. Because every night you choose to feel, instead of giving in to the numbness, even though it hurts. That's not weakness, Quintus. That's incredible strength. He crossed the distance between them in a blur of supernatural speed, stopping just inches away. Willa's breath caught. Up close, he was overwhelming, tall and powerful and ancient, radiating barely controlled intensity. His eyes searched her face as though looking for answers to questions he hadn't asked. Why do you care? He demanded. You're here because you needed money. This was supposed to be a job. Why do you care what happens to a monster like me? You're not a monster. I've killed thousands, Willa, fed on humans, waged wars, ruled with an iron fist. I'm a predator pretending it's civilization. You're a person who survived for 500 years by being strong, who broke under impossible circumstances, and who's fighting his way back despite the cost. That's not a monster. That's someone extraordinary. Quintus's hand lifted, trembling, stopping just short of touching her face. I could kill you without thinking, drain you in seconds. You should be terrified of me. I'm not. Why not? Because, Willa said softly. I see you, not the vampire king, not the fearsome predator, not the frozen statue. I see Quintus, who's in pain but trying to heal, who listens to poetry even though it hurts, who asks about coffee because he's trying to reconnect with a world he pulled away from, who stands at windows wishing he could feel the sun again. How could I be afraid of someone I see so clearly? His hand dropped back to his side, but his eyes never left hers. You're remarkable, Willa Dalton. I'm really not. I'm just stubborn and broke and too foolish to know when to run. No, his voice held absolute conviction. You're brave and compassionate and determined. You're warmth personified, standing in the presence of living ice without flinching. He trailed off, something like wonder crossing his face. I can feel your warmth. For the first time in a decade, I can feel something other than cold. He reached out again, and this time his fingers made contact, barely brushing her cheek. His touch was cool but not freezing, gentle despite his obvious strength. Willa held perfectly still, barely breathing, as Quintus traced the line of her face with infinite care. Warm, he whispered. You're so warm. Then he pulled back abruptly, stepping away, his expression shuddering. I apologize. That was inappropriate. You're under my employ in my home. I didn't mind. Willa interrupted quietly. Quintus's eyes snapped to hers, intense and searching. You should. I'm dangerous, Willa. The cold isn't gone, it's just retreating. It could come back at any moment and freeze me solid again. I could hurt you. You won't. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Willa took a deliberate step toward him, because even when you were completely frozen, you never hurt me, never threatened me, never gave me any reason to fear you. The cold might take away your emotions, but it doesn't make you cruel. It doesn't change who you fundamentally are. And who am I? Someone good, Willa said simply. Someone worth saving. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Quintus gestured to her chair. Read to me, please. I need your voice. I need to focus on something other than how much I want to. He cut himself off. Please read. So Willa read, choosing a novel about two people from different worlds learning to understand each other, learning to love despite impossible odds. And Quintus listened, his eyes never leaving her, his expression slowly softening as the words washed over him. When she finished for the night, he stopped her at the door. Willa, he said, his voice low and rough, thank you for everything, for being patient, for being here, for being you. Always, she promised, and meant it with her whole heart. The following weeks saw Quintus transform before Willa's eyes. The cold was still there, she could see him struggling against it, could watch him occasionally freeze mid-sentence as numbness threatened to reclaim him, but he was fighting back with determination that was inspiring to witness. He started venturing out of his chambers during the day, reclaiming parts of his life he'd abandoned. He began meeting with his advisors again, making decisions about his territory, slowly reassuming his responsibilities as king. But the nights remained theirs. Every evening at midnight, Willa would arrive at his chambers, and they'd talk and read and exist in their own private world. The boundaries between reader and subject, employer and employee, vampire and human, began to blur and dissolve. Quintus started sharing more about his past, his human life in medieval Scandinavia, his early years as a vampire, the wars and loves and losses that had shaped him over 5 centuries. Willa learned he'd been married as a human, had loved his wife fiercely but briefly before war had taken him. He'd never married again after being turned, had taken lovers over the centuries but never allowed himself to love, convinced that his vampire nature made him unworthy of such a gentle emotion. "I thought love was for humans," he told her one night, his voice distant with memory. "That when I died on that battlefield I'd lost the right to it. Vampires take, we possess, we obsess, but love, true selfless love? I thought that was beyond us." "Do you still believe that?" Willa asked. Quintus looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said quietly. "Not anymore." The tension between them grew more palpable each night. Quintus would find excuses to move closer, to let their hands brush when exchanging books, to stand near enough that Willa could feel the cool presence of him like a balm against her skin. Willa found herself dressing more carefully for their sessions, letting her hair down from its practical bun, wearing the one nice dress she owned instead of her usual casual clothes. They were circling each other, drawn together by something neither wanted to name but couldn't deny. The breaking point came in early February, during a massive blizzard that buried Chicago under feet of snow and knocked out power across the city. The mansion, with its backup generators and centuries of vampire preparation, remained functional, but the storm created an atmosphere of isolation that made the world feel very small and intimate. Willa was reading by candlelight. The generators maintained heat, but Quintus preferred the ambiance of flames when the wind outside reached a shrieking crescendo. She jumped at the sound, the book slipping from her hands. Quintus was beside her in an instant, moving with that impossible vampire speed, his hand steadying her shoulder. "It's just wind," he said softly. "The storm can't reach us here. I know, Willa laughed shakily. "I'm not usually so jumpy. Something about tonight feels different." "It does," Quintus agreed. He'd crouched beside her chair, bringing him to eye level with her, and he made no move to return to his seat. His hand remained on her shoulder, and even through her dress she could feel his touch, cool but no longer cold, present and real and anchoring. "Willa, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race. "Okay, I'm in love with you." He said it simply, directly, his red eyes holding hers with unwavering intensity. "I think I started falling for you that first night you changed the reading material, when you decided you knew better than the approved list. I fell deeper every time you looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster. Every time you stayed past your required hours. Every time you made me feel something when I'd thought I was beyond feeling. I'm in love with you, and I know it's impossible and inappropriate and completely unfair to tell you when you're in my employ and under my roof, but I can't." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't keep pretending I'm not. Not when you've given me back the ability to feel. Not when every moment with you makes me believe I might deserve this." Willa's breath had stopped completely somewhere during his confession. "Quintus, you don't have to say anything," he continued, starting to pull back. "I don't expect you to return my feelings. I just needed you to know. Needed to say it out loud before the cold comes back and I lose the ability to—" Willa grabbed his shirt and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Quintus went completely still, frozen in shock. Then he surged forward, one hand cupping the back of her head, the other wrapping around her waist, pulling her against him as he kissed her back with 5 centuries of longing and desperation and need. His lips were cool against hers but mobile and demanding, and the kiss tasted of night and winter and something indefinably ancient. Willa melted into him, her hands fisting in his hair, all her carefully maintained professionalism dissolving in the face of this overwhelming connection. She'd been holding back for weeks, telling herself it was impossible, that he was her employer and a vampire king, and so far above her it was laughable. But none of that mattered now, not when he was kissing her like she was the only warm thing in an endless winter, like she was precious and necessary and essential. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his from emotion rather than need for air, Quintus pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," Willa whispered. "I've been falling for you since the night you first spoke to me. Maybe before that. I love you, Quintus." His arms tightened around her, and she felt wetness against her temple. Pulling back, she saw tears tracking down his pale cheeks, tears that glittered red in the candlelight, tinged with the blood that sustained him. "I didn't think I could still cry," he said wonderingly, touching his own face in shock. "I haven't cried in 300 years. Willa reached up to wipe his tears away and he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that was so tender it made her heart ache. "I don't deserve you," he murmured against her skin. "That's not your decision to make," Willa replied. "I choose you, Quintus. If you'll have me, if I'll have you, He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. Willa, you're offering yourself to a vampire king who's still half frozen and struggling to feel, who could potentially hurt you, drain you, pull you into a dangerous world you know nothing about, who will outlive you by centuries, who will have to watch you age and die while I remain unchanged, and you're asking if I'll have you? Yes, Willa said steadily. I know what you are. I know the risks. I don't care. I want this. I want you. All of you, the strength and the struggle, the centuries of history and the current pain, the vampire king and the man who asks about coffee. I want everything. Quintus stared at her as though she were a miracle he couldn't quite believe in. Then he kissed her again, slower this time, reverent, pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection between them. When he pulled back, his eyes were brighter than she'd ever seen them, the red warming to something closer to ruby. I will spend every moment proving myself worthy of that gift, he promised. I will protect you, treasure you, give you everything I am and everything I have. You will never want for anything. You will never be unsafe. I swear it on my crown and my life. I don't need your crown or your promises, Willa said softly. I just need you. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other, the storm howling outside while they created their own warmth inside. Yet eventually Quintus pulled her up from the chair, leading her to the large sofa near the fireplace. They settled there together, Willa tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them exactly where they belonged. Tell me everything, Quintus said, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm. Your favorite color, your dreams, your fears, everything. I want to know all of you. So Willa talked, sharing pieces of herself she'd never told anyone, her love of old movies, her secret dream of writing novels, her fear that she'd never be enough, never measure up, never escape the shadow of her trauma. And Quintus listened with complete focus, asking questions, sharing his own stories in return, slowly weaving their lives together through words and touch and presence. I want to show you my world, he said eventually. Not just this mansion, but the real vampire world, the courts and councils, the old places and traditions. I want you to meet my people, to understand the full scope of what you're choosing. I'd like that, Willa agreed. But Quintus, what does this mean for us? I'm human. I'll age. Eventually I'll die and you'll don't. His arms tightened around her. Don't think about that now. We have time, Willa. Decades, if we're fortunate. And when the time comes, if you want it, I could offer you eternity. I could turn you. Willa's breath caught. You'd do that? If you wanted it, if you asked. I would never force it on you, never take that choice away. But yes, if you wanted to stay with me forever, I would turn you in a heartbeat. He paused. Is that something you'd want? I don't know, Willa admitted. It's a lot to consider. But I'm not saying no. I need time to think about it. You have all the time you need, Quintus assured her. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you if I have any say in it. They fell into comfortable silence, simply existing together. Willa felt something settle in her chest, some restless anxiety she'd carried her whole life finally easing. This felt right. Impossible and complicated and probably foolish, but right. Quintus, she said quietly, what happens now? Tomorrow and the day after, do we tell people? Do I keep reading to you? What now? He interrupted gently. We figure it out together. Yes, we tell people. I'll not hide you away like some secret. You're too precious for that. You'll continue reading to me because I love hearing your voice, but now I can hold you while you do it. We'll navigate the politics and complications together. And Willa? He tilted her face up to his. I will never let anything harm you. Not the vampire world, not my court, not even the cold if it returns. You are mine now, and I protect what's mine with everything I am. The possessiveness in his voice should have been frightening. Instead, it made Willa feel safer than she'd ever felt in her life. Yours, she agreed softly. And you're mine. Always, Quintus promised, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of forever. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving Chicago blanketed in pristine white. Quintus, who hadn't left his chambers in daylight for a decade, stood at his window with heavy curtains drawn to protect him from direct sun, and stared out at the transformed city. Willa stood beside him, his arm around her waist, marveling at how natural it felt to be there. Beautiful, Quintus murmured. The snow, everything. He looked down at her, and the warmth in his expression made her heart skip. The world seems beautiful again. Alive and full of possibility. I'd forgotten what that felt like. You're really not frozen anymore, Willa said wonderingly. The cold is gone, isn't it? Not gone, Quintus corrected. But banked, controlled, burned away by something warmer. His hand cupped her cheek. By you. You thawed me, Willa. Your voice, your presence, your stubborn refusal to give up on me. You brought me back from the edge of becoming a monster. You were never going to become a monster. Willa insisted. You were just hurt. Same thing for my kind. Hurt deeply enough, old enough, and we freeze from the inside out until nothing remains but hunger and cold. I was so close, Willa. Another year, maybe less, and I would have been completely lost. But you reached me in time. The weight of that settled over Willa. She'd saved him. This ancient, powerful vampire king had been saved by a broke governess with nothing but poetry and stubbornness. It seemed impossible, but the evidence was holding her close, looking at her like she'd hung the moon. Come, Quintus said suddenly. I want you to meet someone. He led her through the mansion, down to a wing she'd never explored. They stopped before an ornate door, which Quintus opened to reveal a library even more magnificent than the main one. And sitting in a chair by the window, reading peacefully, was a vampire woman with the same white hair and pale skin as Quintus. Though her eyes were deep violet instead of red, she looked up as they entered and her eyes widened. Quintus, you're awake. Truly awake. Seraphine, Quintus said warmly. I'd like you to meet Willa Dalton. Willa, this is Seraphine, my sister. She was turned by the same maker, my sister in blood if not in birth. Seraphine stood slowly, studying Willa with ancient eyes that saw far too much. Then a slow smile spread across her face. The reader. Constance told me we'd hired another reader, but I never imagined. She turned to Quintus. She brought you back. She did, Quintus agreed, pulling Willa closer. And she's not just my reader anymore. She's my love, my heart, and I need you to help me protect her from what comes next. Seraphine's expression grew serious. The court will have opinions about a human companion for the king. The court can have all the opinions they want, Quintus said coldly. She's mine, and I will destroy anyone who threatens her. Easy, brother. Seraphine raised her hands peacefully. I'm on your side. I always have been. I'm simply warning you that this won't be easy. There are traditionalists who will see her as a weakness, who will try to use her against you or remove her entirely. Willa felt a chill of fear, but Quintus's arm tightened around her. Then we'll deal with them. Together, yes, Seraphine agreed. Together. Which is why I'm offering my services as political advisor and bodyguard. Someone needs to help navigate the mess you're about to create by returning to court with a human lover. She smiled at Willa. Welcome to vampire politics, dear. It's absolutely vicious and you'll hate every minute of it. But you've got the king's love and my protection, which makes you one of the most powerful people in this city, whether you realize it or not. Over the following weeks, Willa was introduced to the reality of vampire society. It was everything Seraphine had promised: vicious, complicated, and full of predators who smiled while plotting your destruction. The vampire court convened in an underground palace beneath Chicago's financial district, a massive complex of throne rooms and meeting halls that looked like they'd been transported from medieval Europe. Quintus returned to court with Willa at his side, and the reaction was immediate and explosive. The assembled vampires, dozens of them, pale and beautiful and dangerous, stared at the human girl standing beside their returned king with everything from shock to calculation to barely concealed hostility. My lords and ladies, Quintus said, his voice carrying easily through the vast hall. He was magnificent, like this, regal and commanding every inch the ancient king. His presence dominated the room, making it clear that despite his decade of absence, his power remained absolute. I have returned from my sabbatical. The cold has been conquered, and I have brought with me the one responsible for my recovery. Lady Willa Dalton, who will from this day forward stand under my personal protection as my acknowledged consort. The silence that followed was deafening. Then a vampire with silver hair and black eyes stood from his seat on the lower council. Your Majesty, while we are grateful for your return, surely you must see the impossibility of what you're suggesting. A human consort? It's unprecedented, inappropriate, dangerous. Dangerous to whom, Lord Casimir? Quintus asked coldly. To the girl herself. She's fragile, mortal, utterly unsuited to our world. She could be accidentally killed in any number of ways, could be used against you by your enemies, could be protected by the full might of my crown and my personal power, Quintus interrupted. Which is exactly what will happen. Willa is under my protection. Any who harm her will answer to me personally. Any who threaten her will be destroyed. Any who plot against her will find themselves facing charges of treason. Am I making myself clear? His power rolled out through the room, ancient and terrible, reminding every vampire present exactly who ruled here. Several of the younger vampires actually flinched. Even Casimir paled and bowed his head in submission. Crystal clear, Your Majesty. Good. Quintus's expression softened as he turned to Willa. You don't have to stay for the rest of this. Court business is tedious and you've made your appearance. Seraphine will escort you back to the surface. But Willa squeezed his hand. I'd like to stay if that's all right. I should learn about this part of your life. Pride and love flashed across Quintus's face. As you wish, my love. The rest of the court session was indeed tedious disputes over territory, discussions of blood source management, reports on vampire-human relations in the city. But Willa watched and listened, learning the names and dynamics of the people who made up Quintus's world. She also watched the way vampires watched her, some with curiosity, some with calculation, a few with barely concealed contempt. She was in danger here, she knew it with absolute certainty. But with Quintus's hand in hers and Seraphine a constant protective presence, she also felt strangely safe. After court ended, a vampire approached them, a woman who looked about 30 with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Your Majesty, Lady Dalton, I wanted to formally introduce myself. I'm Isabeau, head of the Human Relations Committee. If you need anything, Lady Dalton, or have questions about navigating our society, please don't hesitate to ask. We have other humans in our community, blood donors, liaisons, a few who've married into vampire families. You're not as alone as you might feel." "Thank you," Willa said, genuinely grateful. "I appreciate that." Isabeau's smile widened. "You're very welcome, and between you and me, we're all thrilled to have His Majesty back. The court has been rudderless without him. If it took a brave human girl to thaw his heart, then we owe you a debt we can never repay." As they left the underground palace and emerged into the cold Chicago night, Willa leaned against Quintus, suddenly exhausted. "That was intense," she admitted. "You were magnificent," Quintus replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Calm and composed and absolutely fearless. My court has never seen anything like you. Some of them hate me. Some of them fear what you represent: change, emotion, the possibility that their ancient king might care about something more than power and tradition. But they'll learn to accept you, or they'll learn to keep their opinions to themselves." Back at the mansion, Willa collapsed onto the sofa in Quintus's chambers, the weight of the evening finally catching up with her. Quintus sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I've pulled you into something complicated and dangerous. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll give you enough money to be comfortable for life. I'll make sure you're safe. But I won't force you to stay in this world if it's too much." Willa pulled back to look at him directly. "I'm not going anywhere. Yes, it's complicated. Yes, it's dangerous, but so is loving you, and I'm doing that anyway. We're in this together, remember?" Relief and love flooded Quintus's expression. "Together," he agreed, kissing her deeply. The next few months were a whirlwind of adjustment. Willa moved into Quintus's chambers officially, learning to navigate the strange schedule of living with a vampire, sleeping late, staying up until dawn, existing in a world of candlelight and shadow. She continued her research in the library, now with access to text on vampire history and lore that most humans never saw. She attended court functions at Quintus's side, slowly gaining acceptance from most of the vampire community. And every night, she still read to Quintus, but now she did it curled against him, his arms around her, his cool presence a comfort rather than a mystery. The ritual had transformed from duty to pleasure, a quiet intimacy they both treasured. The challenges came from expected and unexpected directions. Some vampires remained hostile to her presence, though none dared act openly against her with Quintus's protection. Some tried more subtle approaches, spreading rumors, making backhanded comments, attempting to drive a wedge between her and Quintus through insinuation and manipulation. Quintus dealt with each threat swiftly and brutally, making it clear that his consort was absolutely off limits. After he publicly stripped a prominent vampire lord of his title for making a lewd comment about Willa, the direct challenges stopped. The subtle ones continued, but Willa learned to navigate them with grace and the help of allies like Seraphine and Isabeau. The bigger challenge was internal, the question of her mortality and what their future looked like. Quintus never pressed her about being turned, but the unspoken question hung between them. Could she be happy growing old while he remained unchanged? Could he bear to watch her age and die? Neither wanted to face it, so they lived in the present, treasuring each day, until the night everything came to a head. Willa had been living at the mansion for 6 months when she woke in the middle of the day to the sound of breaking glass. Quintus was in his bed in the sealed chambers where he slept during daylight hours, unconscious in the deep sleep all vampires fell into when the sun was high. She was alone, vulnerable, and someone had just broken into the mansion. Heart racing, Willa grabbed her phone and texted the emergency number Seraphine had given her. Then she barricaded herself in Quintus's sleeping chamber, which was reinforced and nearly impenetrable. She could hear footsteps in the halls outside, multiple sets moving with purpose. The door handle rattled. Then a voice, male and cold. "Lady Dalton, we know you're in there. Come out peacefully and you won't be harmed. We simply want to talk." "I'm not opening this door," Willa called back, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Leave now or face the consequences when His Majesty wakes." His Majesty is the problem, the voice replied. He's been compromised. A vampire king cannot be ruled by his heart, especially not his heart's attachment to a fragile human. We're here to remove the source of his weakness. This is your last chance to cooperate. Terror flooded through Willa. They meant to kill her. Multiple vampires, in the middle of the day when Quintus couldn't wake to defend her, had come to eliminate the human who'd made their king vulnerable. The door shuddered as something slammed into it from outside. The reinforced frame held, but it wouldn't last forever. Willa looked at Quintus, sleeping peacefully in his sealed bed that protected him from light and disturbance. There was no way to wake him. The sleep was too deep, too absolute. She was alone. The door shuddered again, and she heard wood beginning to crack. She needed a weapon. Frantically, Willa searched the chamber, finally finding an ornamental sword mounted on the wall. She had no idea how to use it, but it was better than nothing. She positioned herself between the door and Quintus's sleeping form. Sword raised in shaking hands, the door burst open. 3 vampires entered, all male, all bearing the crest of Lord Casimir, the vampire who'd objected to her presence at court. They looked at her with cold calculation, clearly not threatened by the human girl with a sword. "Put that down before you hurt yourself," the lead vampire said. "Come any closer and I'll hurt you," Willa replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. The vampire laughed. "Adorable, really, but we don't have time for this." He started forward, moving with that impossible vampire's speed. Willa swung the sword with all her strength. She was untrained and terrified, but desperation lent her power. The blade connected with the vampire's arm, opening a deep gash that made him stumble back with a curse. "You little," he snarled, and then Seraphine was there, appearing in the doorway like an avenging angel. "Gentlemen," she said pleasantly, her violet eyes promising death, "you've made a terrible mistake." The fight that followed was brief and brutal. Seraphine moved like violence given form, taking down 2 of the intruders in seconds. The third tried to run, but she caught him, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack stone. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her hand around his throat. "Lord Casimir," he gasped. "He said the human had to be removed before she corrupted his majesty completely. Said it was for the good of the realm." "How noble," Seraphine said coldly. "And how treasonous. You attacked the king's consort in his own home during daylight when he couldn't defend her. That's not just an assault, it's a declaration of war." She tightened her grip. "You're going to deliver a message to Casimir. Tell him that when his majesty wakes, he's going to face royal judgment. Tell him there's nowhere in this city, this country, or this world where he can hide from the king's justice. Tell him." Seraphine. Quintus's voice, still rough with the remnants of day sleep, came from behind them. Willa turned to see him emerging from his chamber, having somehow fought his way to consciousness despite the hour. His red eyes blazed with fury, his power rolling through the room like a physical force. "Let him go." Seraphine released the vampire, who collapsed to the floor, gasping. Quintus walked past him as though he were beneath notice, going straight to Willa. His hands ran over her, checking for injuries, his expression frantic. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "I'm fine," Willa assured him, letting the sword drop as she wrapped her arms around him. "Seraphine got here in time. I'm okay." Some of the terror left Quintus's expression, replaced by blazing anger. He turned to the surviving attacker, and the vampire actually whimpered. "You came into my home," Quintus said softly, each word precisely enunciated. "During daylight hours, when you knew I would be helpless to stop you. You broke through my defenses, and you attempted to murder the woman I love. Do you have any concept of the magnitude of your crime?" "Lord Casimir said," the vampire began. "I don't care what Casimir said." Quintus's voice could have frozen fire. "You made a choice. You followed orders you knew were treasonous. And now you're going to face the consequences." He looked at Seraphine. "Emergency session, tonight, sunset. I want every vampire in Chicago present and bring Casimir in chains." By sunset, word had spread throughout the vampire community. The underground palace was packed beyond capacity, every vampire in the region crowding in to witness their king's justice. Casimir stood in chains before the throne, his silver hair disheveled, his expression defiant despite his obvious fear. Willa sat beside Quintus's throne, a place of honor that made her status absolutely clear. She'd wanted to stay home, still shaken from the attack, but Quintus had insisted. "They need to see you," he'd said. "They need to understand that you survived their attack, that you're not going anywhere, and that I will destroy anyone who threatens you. Your presence is as much a statement as my judgment." So Willa sat straight and calm, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed, while Quintus delivered his judgment. "Lord Casimir," Quintus said, his voice carrying through the vast hall, "you stand accused of treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and ordering an attack on my consort. How do you plead? Not guilty, your majesty. Casimir raised his chin. I acted in the best interests of the realm. You've been compromised by your attachment to that human. She's made you weak, emotional, unstable. I sought to remove the source of contamination before she could do more damage to your judgment and our society. I see. Quintus leaned forward, his red eyes blazing. Let me be absolutely clear about something, Casimir, so that you and everyone present understands. Willa Dalton didn't make me weak. She made me strong. She pulled me back from a cold that would have consumed me completely, that would have left me a frozen shell ruling over you like a tyrant with no compassion or mercy. She reminded me what it means to care, to feel, to rule with heart as well as strength. She saved me, and through me she saved all of you from the monster I was becoming. He stood, power radiating from him. You say she's made me unstable? I've made more clear, fair decisions in the past 6 months than I did in the 5 years before the cold took me. You say she's contaminated my judgment? I say she's refined it. And you say she's human as though that's a weakness? Her humanity is her strength. Her mortality makes every moment precious. Her courage in facing a world of immortal predators without flinching makes her braver than half the vampires in this room. Quintus descended from the throne, walking to stand before Casimir. You're right about one thing, though. I am different because of her. I'm better, and I will spend the rest of my immortal life ensuring no one ever threatens her again. He turned to address the full court. Let this be the final word on Lady Willa Dalton. She is my consort, my love, and under my absolute protection. She will eventually be my queen. Whether through her remaining human or through transformation into one of us, that choice is hers and hers alone. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who plots against her plots against the crown. And anyone who touches her will face permanent death. This is not negotiable. This is not up for debate. This is law. The court remained silent, the weight of royal decree settling over them all. Quintus returned his attention to Casimir. As for you, the penalty for attempted murder of the royal consort is death. But I'm going to offer you a choice because, unlike you, I believe in mercy. You can accept permanent death here and now, swift and painless. Or you can accept exile, banishment from North America, your title stripped, your property seized, forbidden from ever returning under penalty of death. Choose. Casimir's face had gone ashen. Exile, he whispered. So be it. Quintus gestured, and guards moved forward to remove the chains and escort Casimir from the hall. You have 24 hours to leave my territory. If you're still here after that, my earlier mercy expires. As Casimir was led away, Quintus returned to his throne and took Willa's hand. Are there any others who wish to challenge Lady Dalton's place at my side? Who wish to test my resolve? Who believe they can threaten what I've claimed without consequence? The silence was absolute. Not a single vampire moved. Good, Quintus said with grim satisfaction. Then this matter is settled. Court is dismissed. Back at the mansion, the adrenaline finally left Willa and she collapsed into Quintus's arms, shaking. He held her tightly, pressing kisses to her hair, murmuring reassurances. I'm sorry, he said over and over. I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated this, should have had better protection. You could have been killed while I slept helplessly. And I stop, Willa interrupted, cupping his face in her hands. You couldn't have predicted Casimir would be that stupid. And I'm fine. Seraphine got there in time and I'm fine. You had to defend yourself with a sword you barely know how to hold. You had to stand between me and intruders while I was unconscious. That should never have happened. But it did, and we survived it, and now everyone knows exactly where I stand. Willa managed a shaky smile. I'm officially the consort to the scariest vampire king in North America. I think my safety just increased exponentially. Quintus's expression remained troubled. What if next time I'm not able to wake? What if something happens during the day and I can't protect you? Then I'll protect myself, and Seraphine will be there, and eventually I'll learn to properly use that sword instead of just swinging wildly. She paused. Or, Quintus prompted, his eyes searching hers. Or I could accept your offer. To be turned, to become a vampire. Quintus went very still. Willa, if you're saying this because of fear, because of what happened today, I'm not, Willa interrupted. I mean, yes, today was terrifying and it definitely made me think about my vulnerability. But I've been thinking about this for months, Quintus. Weighing the options, considering what I'd be giving up and what I'd be gaining. She took his hands. I love you. I want forever with you. And yes, I'm scared of the transformation. Scared of what I'll become, but I'm more scared of leaving you. Of growing old while you stay young. Of dying and abandoning you to the cold again. You're 24 years old, Quintus said, his voice thick with emotion. You have your whole human life ahead of you. Family, children, growing old naturally, all the things vampirism would take from you forever. I won't let you make this decision lightly. I'm not making it lightly. I've thought about this constantly. Yes, I'm young. Yes, I'm giving things up. But I'm also gaining things time with you, power to protect myself, the ability to be your true partner in this world instead of the fragile human you constantly have to guard. I'm ready, Quintus. I want this. Quintus closed his eyes, clearly warring with himself. If we do this, there's no going back. Once you're turned, you're a vampire forever. You'll need blood to survive. You'll burn in sunlight. You'll outlive everyone you know. You'll be bound to the vampire world and its politics for eternity. I know, Willa said steadily. And I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you and forever in this life. Turn me, Quintus. Make me your queen in truth, not just in title. When Quintus opened his eyes, they were wet with red-tinged tears. Are you absolutely certain? Absolutely certain, then we'll do it properly. Not in fear or haste, but as a celebration. We'll hold a ceremony, invite the court, make it an official royal transformation. You'll become not just a vampire, but a vampire queen, with all the rights and protections that entails. He pulled her close, his forehead pressed to hers. And Willa, thank you for choosing me, for choosing this, for loving me enough to give up your humanity. Thank you for loving me enough to give me the choice, Willa replied. The ceremony was held 2 weeks later, giving Willa time to say goodbye to her human life and prepare for what came next. Seraphine helped her understand what to expect: the pain of transformation, the overwhelming sensory input afterward, the burning hunger for blood that would consume her for the first few weeks. Isabeau helped her write letters to her distant relatives, explaining she was moving abroad and wouldn't be in contact for a while. It felt like a death in a way, severing ties with the human world, but Willa was at peace with her choice. The night of the ceremony, the underground palace was decorated like something from a fairy tale, blood-red roses everywhere. Candles in the thousands, every vampire in Chicago present to witness their king's consort become their queen. Willa wore a gown of deep burgundy silk that Seraphine had commissioned, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking every inch the vampire royalty she was about to become. Quintus met her at the entrance to the throne room, breathtaking in formal black with his white hair loose and his red eyes warm with love and pride. Last chance to change your mind, he murmured, taking her hands. Not a chance, Willa replied. He led her through the court to the throne, where they stood before the assembled vampires. Quintus addressed the crowd, his voice strong and clear. Tonight we witness the transformation of Lady Willa Dalton into vampire, into queen, into eternal companion to the throne. She makes this choice freely, with full knowledge of what she's accepting and what she's giving up. And I make a vow before you all: I will love her, honor her, protect her, and rule beside her for all the ages to come. She will be my equal in all things, my partner in leadership, my heart and my conscience and my strength. He turned to Willa, his expression tender despite the formal setting. Are you ready, my love? Ready, Willa confirmed. The transformation itself was intimate despite the audience. Quintus bit into his own wrist first, offering her his ancient blood to strengthen her for what came next. Willa drank, the taste copper and strange and powerful. Then Quintus gathered her close, his mouth at her throat, and bit down. The pain was immediate and all-consuming. Willa had been warned, but nothing could have prepared her for the sensation of her blood being drained away, her life pouring out, her heart slowing to a stop. She clung to Quintus, trusting him completely even as everything went dark. Then came the return flow, Quintus's blood pouring back into her, ancient and powerful, remaking her from the inside out. Her heart stuttered, stopped, started again with a new rhythm. Her senses exploded outward. Suddenly she could hear every heartbeat in the vast room, smell blood and stone and centuries of vampire presence, see every detail with crystalline clarity. The pain reached a crescendo and then suddenly stopped, leaving her gasping in Quintus's arms, reborn into something new. Willa? Quintus's voice was anxious. Talk to me, love. How do you feel? Willa pulled back and opened her eyes. She could feel they were different. Knew without checking that they'd turned the same garnet red as Quintus's. Everything was sharper, clearer, more vivid. The world had transformed into something overwhelming and beautiful. I feel, she started, her voice already different, clearer and more resonant. Alive, powerful, like I've been living in fog my whole life and now I can finally see clearly. Quintus's smile was radiant. He turned to the court, lifting their joined hands. I present to you Queen Willa Ashford, sovereign of the North American vampire courts, my eternal companion and co-ruler. The court erupted in applause, genuine this time, not just polite acknowledgement. Willa could sense their approval, their acceptance, their recognition that she'd proven herself worthy of this transformation through her courage and her dedication to their king. The celebration that followed was elaborate and joyful. Willa was toasted and congratulated, introduced formally to vampires she'd only met in passing, treated with the respect due to royalty. And through it all, Quintus never left her side, his hand in hers, his pride and love evident to everyone present. When they finally returned to the mansion in the hours before dawn, Willa stood at the window of their chambers, marveling at how clearly she could see the city despite the darkness. "Regrets?" Quintus asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "None," Willa said honestly. "This feels right, like this is who I was always meant to become." She leaned back against him. "Thank you for giving me this choice, for not forcing it on me, for letting me decide in my own time. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life." Quintus pressed a kiss to her temple. "I promise you, Willa, I will spend every day of our eternity making sure you never regret this decision." "I know," Willa said, turning in his arms to kiss him. "Because I know you, Quintus Ashford. I know your heart, and I trust you completely." They stood there together as the sun began to rise, and for the first time in her new vampire existence, Willa felt the pull of day sleep beginning to tug at her. It was strange and unsettling, but Quintus was there, guiding her to their bed, holding her close as they both surrendered to the sleep that came with dawn. The months that followed were a period of adjustment and discovery. Willa learned to control her new strength, to manage her hunger for blood, to navigate the vampire world as queen rather than consort. She proved to be a natural leader, compassionate but firm, diplomatic but honest. She improved relations between humans and vampires in Chicago, established new protections for vulnerable humans, and created programs to help other humans transitioning into vampire society. Quintus ruled beside her, his pride in her evident to everyone. The cold never returned Willa's presence. Her love, her partnership kept him warm and present and engaged. Together, they transformed the vampire court from a place of political maneuvering and barely concealed hostility into something more cooperative and hopeful. They had centuries ahead of them, centuries to love each other, to build their kingdom, to face whatever challenges came. And Willa knew with the certainty of her immortal heart that she'd made the right choice. One evening, nearly a year after her transformation, they sat together in their chambers as they did every night. But instead of Willa reading to Quintus, he'd picked up a book himself. "What are you doing?" Willa asked, amused. "Reading to you," Quintus replied with a small smile. "It occurs to me that for all the time you've spent reading to me, I've never returned the favor. So tonight I read to you." "You don't have to," Willa started. "I want to." Quintus pulled her against his side, opening the book, a collection of modern poetry about love and eternity. "Because you saved me, Willa. You read it to me every night when I was frozen and unreachable, gave me your voice and your presence and your warmth without expecting anything in return. You thawed my heart with nothing but patience and poetry and pure, stubborn determination. The least I can do is read to you now." Willa settled against him, warmth flooding through her chest despite her vampire nature. "I love you, Quintus, and I love you, my queen, my heart, my salvation." He pressed a kiss to her hair and began to read, his voice warm and steady and full of emotion. Outside, Chicago sprawled beneath them, millions of human lives flowing through the city, oblivious to the vampire king and queen who watched over them from a mansion that shouldn't exist. But here, in their private sanctuary, none of that mattered. There was only the two of them, the poetry flowing between them, and the eternity they'd built together from nothing but hope and determination and love. Willa had come to this mansion as a desperate human governess, broke and frightened and running from her past. She'd stayed because she needed the money, but she'd fallen in love with a frozen vampire king, and that love had transformed them both. She'd thawed his heart with stories and warmth and stubborn refusal to give up, and he'd given her eternity, power, partnership, and love beyond anything she'd ever imagined. They'd saved each other, and now they had forever to continue saving each other, one night at a time, one story at a time, one shared moment at a time. As Quintus read on and Willa listened, wrapped in his arms and in the love they'd built together, she couldn't imagine any other ending to her story. This was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of her vampire king, queen of a realm she'd never imagined, living an impossible happily ever after that had started with nothing but poetry and hope. The cold was gone. The warmth remained. And together they would face eternity with open hearts and shared purpose, forever and always.